I used to think my life was steady because nothing ever shook it. Every morning followed the same pattern, every night ended the same way, and every promise in my relationship sounded like a line we'd both memorized instead of something we actually felt. On the surface, it looked like security. Inside, it felt like standing in a room where the air never moved. My partner loved me in a way that was reliable and predictable. They remembered birthdays, asked about my day, held my hand in public. There was nothing wrong with them, and somehow that made everything feel worse. I couldn't point to a single moment where love had broken. It had just faded into something quieter, something that felt more like habit than connection. I kept telling myself that this was what growing up looked like. Comfort over excitement, stability over spark. Then my family changed. My parent remarried, and suddenly there was someone new in the house, someone who didn't share my history but was now part of my present. My stepbrother didn't try to fit in right away. He didn't force conversations or pretend we were closer than we were. He watched, listened, noticed. The kind of person who remembered things you said once and never repeated. The kind of person who made silence feel like it meant something instead of just filling space. At first, I didn't think much of it. We were just two people navigating a new family shape, learning where we fit. But I started to realize he saw through the version of myself I showed everyone else. When my partner asked, "Are you okay?" I'd say yes, and they'd accept it. When my stepbrother asked the same question, I felt like he was waiting for a real answer. I hated that it mattered. There was a gym near my place that had a small wellness area, somewhere people went to unwind after long days. It became my excuse to leave the house when everything felt too quiet. One evening, I ran into him there by chance, or at least that's what I told myself. He nodded toward the sauna and said he was heading in, like it was the most casual thing in the world. "Want to join?" he asked. It shouldn't have felt like a decision. It should have been as simple as saying yes or no. But something in my chest tightened, like I already knew this wasn't just about sitting in a warm room and letting time pass. Inside, the heat pressed in from every direction. The air was thick, heavy, the kind that made you aware of your own breathing. We sat across from each other at first, a polite distance, like two people who didn't want to admit they were sharing something private. The quiet stretched, but it wasn't awkward. It was loaded. He broke it first. "You don't look as happy as everyone thinks you are." I laughed, too quickly. "Everyone thinks I'm happy." He shrugged. "That's the impression." I wanted to brush it off. Make a joke. Change the subject. Instead, I felt something crack open. "Impressions aren't always right," I said, staring at the floor. We talked about small things at first. Work, family, how weird it was to suddenly be connected by marriage instead of memory. But every word felt like it was circling something bigger, something neither of us had named yet. Then he said, "Do you ever feel like you're playing a role in your own life?" The question hit harder than I expected. I swallowed. All the time. That was the moment. Not a touch, not a look, just a shared truth that I hadn't given to anyone else in years. I told him about how my relationship felt safe but empty. How I smiled through dinners and plans and conversations that felt like they were happening to someone else. I told him I felt invisible even when I was standing right next to the person who was supposed to know me best. He listened without interrupting. When I finally stopped talking, he said quietly, "You deserve to feel seen." Those words stayed with me longer than the heat in that room, longer than the silence that followed. I knew I should have stood up. I knew I should have ended the conversation and gone back to the life I'd been living. Instead, I stayed. We didn't move closer, but it felt like we had. The space between us shrank without either of us shifting an inch. I could feel the weight of what was happening, even if I didn't have a name for it yet. When I finally left, the world outside felt too bright, too loud. My phone buzzed with a message from my partner asking when I'd be home. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply. For the first time, I realized I had something to hide. Not because I'd done anything I could point to and say, "This is wrong," but because I knew, deep down, that I'd crossed a line I couldn't see. I walked away from the sauna with my heart racing, my mind spinning, and a quiet understanding settling in my chest. Nothing in my life felt steady anymore. And somehow, part of me didn't want it to be. I thought the feeling would fade after that night. I told myself it was just a heavy conversation, just a moment where two people happened to be honest at the same time. But honesty has a way of leaving fingerprints on everything it touches. I started noticing him everywhere. In the kitchen, leaning against the counter with a cup of coffee he didn't seem to drink. In the hallway, pausing like he wanted to say something and then deciding not to. In the living room, laughing at a joke that wasn't even that funny, just to break the tension hanging in the air. My partner noticed my distraction before I did. They'd ask me a question, and I'd answer seconds too late. They'd reach for my hand, and I'd flinch like I'd been caught doing something wrong. Guilt has a sound, and it's loudest in your own head. A few days later, I found a message on my phone. "Are you okay?" he wrote. That was all. 3 words that felt heavier than any confession. I stared at the screen for a long time before I answered. "Yeah, just tired." A lie. Small, harmless, I told myself. The kind people use every day. But it opened a door I hadn't meant to open. We started talking more after that. Not constantly, not in a way that would raise suspicion. Just enough to feel connected, like we were sharing something quiet and secret in the middle of a noisy world. One evening, we ended up alone in the house. My partner was working late. The walls felt too big, the silence too sharp. He sat across from me at the table, turning his phone over in his hands like he was debating whether to leave. "You don't have to stay," I said. "I know," he replied. "I want to." The air between us shifted. Not heavy like before. Focused. Intent. He asked me how things were going with my partner, really going. I hesitated. Every part of me knew I should keep it vague, keep it safe. Instead, I told him the truth. About the arguments we avoided. About the plans that felt like obligations. About how I loved them, but wasn't sure I was still in love. Saying it out loud made it real. He didn't smile. He didn't look relieved. He looked worried. "You shouldn't be telling me this." "I know," I said. "But I don't know who else to tell." That was the moment I understood what I was doing. I was replacing something in my life instead of fixing it. I was taking the trust that belonged to my partner and handing it to someone else because it felt easier than facing the emptiness head on. He stood up, pacing the room like he needed distance from me and couldn't find enough. "This isn't fair," he said. "To you, to them, to us, us." The word slipped out, and neither of us took it back. I felt my heart pounding in my throat. "Then tell me to stop." He looked at me, really looked at me, like he was memorizing a face he knew he wouldn't be allowed to see for much longer. "I don't think I can." That was all it took. Not a promise, not a touch, just the admission that we were both standing on the same side of a line we pretended wasn't there. From that night on, everything felt split in two. There was the life I lived in front of everyone else, where I smiled and nodded and planned weekends and talked about the future like it was something I was excited to step into. And then there was the life that existed in stolen moments. A look across the room. A text that said, "Did you feel that too?" A conversation that ended just before it crossed into something undeniable. My partner started asking questions. Not directly at first. Little things. "You've been quiet lately. Did I do something? You seem far away." I hated how much it hurt to hear them say that. I hated how part of me wanted to run back into their arms and forget everything else. And I hated how another part of me was already gone. One night, I lay in bed next to them, staring at the ceiling while they slept. Their breathing was steady, trusting. I thought about how easy it would be to roll over, to wrap myself in something familiar and safe, to pretend I hadn't let someone else into a place that used to belong only to them. Instead, I reached for my phone. There was a message waiting. "I can't stop thinking about what you said," he wrote. "About feeling invisible. I see you. I don't know what that means for us, but I needed you to know." I closed my eyes, my chest tight. Those words felt like comfort and betrayal wrapped into one. I typed a reply, erased it, typed again. "So do I." I put the phone down and turned away from my partner, my back to the life I was supposed to be choosing. That was when I finally admitted the truth to myself. I hadn't just crossed a line. I was walking away from it. The hardest part wasn't keeping the secret. It was realizing how naturally it fit into my life. I woke up every day and stepped into the version of myself everyone expected to see. I made breakfast with my partner, talked about work, laughed at things that weren't that funny. I played the role so well that sometimes I almost believed it again. Almost. Underneath everything, there was a second current running through me, quiet but constant. Every buzz of my phone made my pulse jump. Every time I heard his name in the house, my chest tightened. I hated how aware I was of him, like my body recognized him before my mind could remind me why it shouldn't. We didn't talk as much as we wanted to. That was part of the agreement we never actually made. Keep it rare. Keep it careful. Keep it small enough that it wouldn't destroy everything around us. But even small things can rot if you hide them long enough. At a family gathering, we were all in the same room. My partner sat beside me, their hand resting on my knee, grounding, warm. Across the space, he leaned against the wall, watching a conversation he wasn't really part of. Our eyes met for half a second. Just long enough to remind me of everything we weren't saying. I looked away first. My partner noticed. I felt their hand tighten slightly. "You okay?" they whispered. "Yeah," I said, too quickly. The word felt thin in my mouth. The night dragged on. Laughter echoed around me, but I felt like I was underwater, hearing it from a distance. When it was finally over and we were alone again, my partner turned to me, their face serious in a way that made my stomach drop. "You've been somewhere else for weeks," they said. "Talk to me." I wanted to. I really did. I wanted to tell them everything, to dump the weight of it all onto the table and see what survived. But fear is a powerful thing. Fear of hurting them. Fear of losing them. Fear of what would happen if I said the truth out loud and couldn't take it back. "I'm just stressed," I said. Another lie. Bigger than the last one. Heavier. They nodded, but I could see it in their eyes. They didn't believe me. Trust doesn't shatter all at once. It cracks, slowly, with every moment you choose yourself over honesty. Later that night, I found him in the kitchen, standing in the dark with only the light from the fridge spilling across the floor. He closed the door when he saw me, the room falling back into shadow. "This has to stop," he said. I leaned against the counter, my heart pounding. "I know. You don't act like you know." I didn't have an answer for that. Because knowing and doing are two different things, and I was stuck in the space between them. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I see what this is doing to you. To them. To me. We're tearing something apart without even touching it." The words stung because they were true. "Then walk away," I said. "You're the one who still can." He laughed softly, not because it was funny, but because it hurt. "So are you." We stood there in silence, both of us waiting for the other to make a decision we were too afraid to make ourselves. After that, he pulled back. The messages stopped. The looks across the room disappeared. He became polite, distant, careful. It should have been a relief. It should have made things easier. It didn't. The absence was louder than the presence ever had been. I found myself reaching for my phone and stopping, staring at the screen like it might light up on its own. I felt abandoned by the person I had no right to need in the first place. My partner, on the other hand, leaned in. They planned dates. They talked about trips we could take, about moving forward, about building something bigger together. Every word felt like a gift and a warning at the same time. One evening, as we sat on the couch, they turned to me and said, "I feel like I'm losing you." The honesty in their voice almost broke me. I swallowed hard. "You're not." Another lie. The biggest one yet. That night, my phone buzzed for the first time in days. "We can't keep pretending this didn't happen," he wrote. "I'm not okay. I don't think you are either." I stared at the message, my chest tight, my throat burning. At the other end of the room, my partner was talking about something ordinary, something safe. Their voice faded into background noise as I looked at the words on my screen. 2 truths, 2 lives. And I was standing in the middle, holding both, knowing that whichever one I dropped was going to shatter. I finally understood that there was no version of this where everyone walked away whole. There was only a choice between who I would hurt first. And I still couldn't decide. I didn't answer his message right away. I sat there, my phone heavy in my hand, listening to my partner talk about things that suddenly felt like they belonged to another version of me. I nodded in the right places, smiled when I was supposed to, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. I already knew there was no way out that didn't leave something broken behind. Later that night, when the house finally went quiet, I found him outside. The air was cold enough to sting, sharp enough to keep me awake. He stood with his hands in his pockets, staring at the ground like he was bracing himself for impact. "I can't do this anymore," he said before I could speak. "I can't be the secret that lives between you and your life." I felt my chest tighten. "You were never a secret to me." "That's the problem," he replied. "I should have been." We stood there, the space between us filled with everything we hadn't said. I wanted to reach out, to close the distance, to make it easier for both of us. I didn't. For once, I stayed exactly where I was. "My partner knows something is wrong," I admitted. "They've known for a while." He nodded slowly, like he'd expected that. "Then it's already over. You just haven't said the words yet." I hated how calm he sounded, how certain. "It's not that simple." "It is," he said. "It's just painful." There was nothing left to argue with. We both knew what had to happen. The question was who would walk away first, and who would be left standing in the middle of the mess. He took a step back. "I'm going to put some distance between us. For the family. For you. For me." The idea of him leaving, even like this, even after everything, hit harder than I expected. "So that's it. That's what it has to be," he said. "You deserve a life that isn't built on hiding." I wanted to tell him I didn't feel like I deserved anything at all. Instead, I nodded. When I went back inside, my partner was waiting for me in the living room. They were sitting on the edge of the couch, hands clasped together, like they'd been rehearsing this moment while I was gone. "Talk to me," they said. "Not as a request. As a need." I sat down across from them, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it. Every lie I'd told, every moment I'd avoided, every truth I'd buried rose up all at once. "I haven't been honest with you," I said. They didn't interrupt. They just listened, their face changing with every word I spoke. I told them about the loneliness, about feeling unseen, about finding the connection somewhere I shouldn't have been looking for it. I told them nothing physical had happened, and even as I said it, I realized how small that sounded compared to everything else. When I finished, the room felt empty, like all the air had been pulled out of it. They stared at me for a long time. "So you gave someone else the part of you that was supposed to be mine?" I nodded. There was no point pretending otherwise. They stood up slowly, like their legs didn't quite trust the floor. "Do you know what hurts the most?" they asked. "It's not the idea of you touching someone else. It's knowing you trusted them with your heart before you trusted me with the truth." I tried to speak, but nothing came out. "I would have fought for you," they continued. "If you had told me you were unhappy, I would have tried. But you didn't give me that chance." The guilt hit harder than anything else had. "I'm sorry," I said, and for the first time, it felt like the word meant what it was supposed to. They shook their head. "Sorry doesn't fix what's gone." Silence settled between us, thick and final. After a while, they picked up their keys from the table. "I need space," they said. "I don't know what happens after this. I just know I can't stay here tonight." I watched them walk to the door, every step echoing in my chest. When it closed behind them, the house felt bigger and emptier than it ever had before. Days passed. The family felt the shift immediately. Conversations became careful. Laughter felt forced. He kept his distance like he promised, moving through the house like a guest instead of someone who belonged there. I was alone in a way I hadn't been before. Not just without my partner, but without the illusion that I could hold two lives in my hands and keep them both intact. One evening, I found a note on the counter in his handwriting. "I'm staying with a friend for a while. I think it's better this way. Take care of yourself." That was it. No explanations. No dramatic goodbye. Just an ending that didn't feel like one. I stood there, the paper trembling in my fingers, and realized I'd lost them both. One to honesty, one to silence. Now, When I look back at the moment everything changed, it's not the tension, or the secrets, or even the confession that stands out. It's the choice I didn't make when I still had time. I thought infidelity meant crossing a line you could see. I was wrong. Sometimes it's the quiet decisions, the truths you don't share, the feelings you let grow in the dark. And by the time you finally step into the light, there's nothing left behind you to go back to. I don't know what comes next. I don't know if any of this can be repaired, or if some things are meant to stay broken. All I know is that I'm standing in the life I created. And for the first time, there's no one else left to blame.